Welcome to this space, this moment, this message. You didn't just stumble across this video. You didn't click because of a catchy title. You arrived here because heaven led you here. There are no coincidences when it comes to those who are called. Your spirit recognized the pull before your mind could make sense of it. And now that you're here, I want to honor you, not just with words, but with truth. To those of you who have sown into this ground through Super Thank, I see you. But more importantly, heaven sees you. You didn't just support a message, you planted into sacred soil. You felt something real and responded. That act of faith doesn't go unnoticed. You've aligned yourself not with a video, but with a spiritual moment that will bear fruit in your life, in timing only God can orchestrate. Now let me speak plainly. This video didn't come without resistance. There are things, both seen and unseen, that don't want you watching to the end. You may feel distractions, fatigue, interruptions. That's not random. That's warfare. Because the enemy doesn't attack what doesn't threaten him. And if you're here, it's because you carry something that makes darkness nervous. Something that shakes things. Something that sees through the noise. So if you feel the urge to scroll away or come back later, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, why now? Why this message? Why is it that something inside of me already knows this is not just information, it's confirmation? If life is loud right now, if your soul feels tired, I get it. If your mind is racing, if distractions keep knocking, if your emotions feel thin, it's okay to save this video and return when your spirit is still. Don't let the message pass you by because you only half heard what was meant to shift something deep within you. Save it to watch later if you must, but do come back. Because the words spoken here are not just for your ears, they're for your next step. And as this message unfolds, let the background music do its quiet work. It was chosen not just to sound nice, but to recalibrate your inner world, to soften what's been hardened, to soothe what's been stressed, to awaken what's been buried beneath pressure, pain, or people-pleasing. This is more than a video. It's a spiritual pause, a soft landing, a sacred conversation between your soul and the one who chose you. So breathe, be still. You're not alone, and you're not crazy for feeling what you feel. There's more you know than you've ever said out loud. And that knowing, that discernment, is what this message is about. Let's begin. You don't talk much about what really happened. You don't go around exposing the details. You don't bring it up in public, and you've never needed to set the record straight. But make no mistake, they know you know. That's what's keeping them restless. That's why they can't stop talking. Not because you said anything, but because you haven't. Your silence is sacred. It's powerful. And it's unsettling to people who built their comfort on your silence. You walked away, but you didn't walk away clueless. You've carried discernment in your spirit for years, even when you didn't have the language for it. You've seen things without being told. You've felt things before they were confirmed. You've sat across from people smiling at you while your spirit whispered, "They're not for you." And now, they know. They know you saw through it. They know you discerned their intentions. They know that even without evidence, your spirit knew what their words tried to hide. And that terrifies them, because they can't control someone who doesn't need proof to walk away. They can't manipulate someone who listens to God more than to gossip. They can't lie to someone who sees truth in the spirit before it shows up in the natural. And that's who you are. That's why the room feels heavy when you enter. That's why they talk in circles when you're around. That's why people who once mocked you now watch you closely. But let's rewind, because you didn't always feel this confident. There was a time when you questioned your gift. You second-guessed your intuition. You tried to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when everything in you was screaming, "Get out." You stayed too long in places you outgrew because you didn't want to hurt anyone. You held secrets. You protected reputations. You let people mislabel you just to keep the peace. And still, they tried to break you. But what they didn't realize is that your silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. You weren't quiet because you were afraid. You were quiet because you were listening. You were watching. You were learning. And now, your stillness holds more power than their noise ever could. That's why they whisper. That's why they watch your page. That's why they bring up your name in conversations that have nothing to do with you. Because they can't figure out how much you really know. And that mystery scares them more than the truth itself. You were never here to destroy them. You weren't here to expose them. You were here to obey God, to carry light, to walk in truth. But when people choose to betray someone like you, someone chosen, someone sent, someone sealed, they're not just offending you. They're offending the one who sent you. And even if you never speak on it, your life will. Your glow will. Your peace will. Your silence will scream in rooms you never step into again. And those who thought they could rewrite the narrative, they'll live in the tension of knowing you saw the truth and never needed to prove it. This video is your confirmation. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You didn't make it up. You discerned it. You saw it. You sensed it. And now God is affirming it. You don't need to break your silence. God will speak through your elevation, through your restoration, through your glow up. They'll watch the hand of God lift you in real time. And remember that they once tried to bury someone they thought was blind. So breathe, sit up. Let the Holy Spirit remind you of who you are and why you were silent. You didn't lose, you listened. And now, they know you know. And that's why they can't stop talking. Comment below to confirm it. 777, I know more than I ever said. Part 1. You know more than you're saying. And that's what unsettles them. You've probably noticed it by now. The stares, the whispers, the way people circle around your presence, but never quite look you in the eye the same. They watch how you move. They overanalyze your silence. They bring up your name in conversations you were never part of. Why? Because deep down, they know you know something. Something about them. Something about the room. Something about yourself. And that knowing, unspoken, unshaken, undeniable, is what terrifies them the most. You never had to expose anyone. Your discernment already did. You never had to announce who you were. Your spirit introduced you long before you opened your mouth. Chosen one, it's not what you said that made them uncomfortable. It's what you could have said and didn't. It's the fact that you sat through betrayal, manipulation, and deception, all while holding wisdom they never had access to. And you didn't clap back. You didn't retaliate. You just watched. Quietly, deeply, spiritually. Your stillness wasn't passive. It was protection. You've always seen deeper. From the time you were young, you could read between the lines. You picked up on energy shifts. You noticed the tone behind the words. You saw through fake smiles and could feel the weight behind someone's silence. You knew when the atmosphere shifted, even if everyone else acted like nothing changed. And that kind of sensitivity, it doesn't come from being overly emotional. It comes from being spiritually marked. God didn't just give you a calling. He gave you eyes to see in the spirit. He gave you a radar for truth, a radar that made you uncomfortable in rooms everyone else seemed fine in, a radar that warned you long before people turned on you, a radar that showed you their intentions, even when their words sounded sweet. And you didn't always speak it, you didn't always call it out, but you knew, and your knowing made them nervous. Because there's something frightening about someone who sees you clearly and still chooses silence. You're not the type to run around gossiping. You're not interested in drama, but you carry receipts in the spirit. You hold knowledge you never use for harm. You see lies and keep walking. You hear betrayal and keep praying. You pick up on manipulation and guard your peace instead of causing a scene. And that's what disturbs them. They don't know what you know, but they know that you know. They test you, poke at you, bring up half-truths to see if you'll react. But you don't. You stay anchored, you stay silent, and it eats at them because they don't know how much you're protecting them by saying nothing. They don't understand that your silence is mercy. That if you ever really said everything you knew, it would wreck their carefully built facade. But you're not here to wreck. You're here to reveal. And when the time is right, when God says speak, you will. But until then, you hold your peace like a sword. This is the mark of the chosen. You're not just called to know, you're called to carry. You're not just gifted with insight, you're entrusted with timing. That's why people feel uneasy around you, not because you're loud, but because your quiet carries weight. Your gaze feels prophetic. Your silence feels holy. Your presence feels like it's listening to more than your ears can hear. And deep down, they respect it, even if they mock it, even if they try to downplay it. Even if they call you strange, distant, mysterious, it's all because your knowing reminds them of everything they've hidden. You don't need to chase validation. You don't need to prove you're right. The way they shift around you is the proof. The way they second-guess themselves after speaking to you. The way they try to convince others that you're just off. It's all a reaction to your unspoken authority. Comment below if this resonates. 777. I know more than I say, and that's why they talk. Part 2. They can't stop watching you because there's something you're not saying, and that terrifies them. They've moved on, or at least they act like they have. They act unbothered, unshaken, untouched by the silence you carry now. But the truth is, they're still watching, still checking your energy from a distance, still reading between the lines of everything you post, still wondering, still overthinking, still whispering to others. Do you think they know? Because deep down, they know you know. There's something about the way you looked at them in the end. Not with revenge, not with anger, not even with confusion, but with stillness, with understanding. You saw more than they admitted. You picked up on more than they confessed. You discerned what was unspoken, what was buried, what was hidden beneath politeness and pretense. And the moment you went quiet, the moment you stopped giving them access to your thoughts, they panicked. Not out loud, but in their spirit. Because when someone who sees deeply stops speaking, it's not just silence. It's prophecy. It's preparation. It's a spiritual message they don't know how to interpret. They fear your stillness now more than they ever feared your voice, because your voice gave them clues. Your emotions gave them a window. Your compassion made them believe they could manage your discernment. But once you stopped explaining, once you stopped defending, once you stopped making yourself smaller to keep peace, the atmosphere shifted. You became unpredictable. You became unreadable. And that terrifies people who need control. You never had to expose them. Your discernment already did. The way you pulled back gracefully, the way you refused to react, the way you smiled with peace they didn't understand. You didn't say much, but your spirit said everything. And that's what keeps them spinning. They're haunted not by what you did, but by what you know, by the possibility that you picked up on the lies, that you sensed the gossip, that you knew the double-mindedness, the two-faced conversations, the spiritual manipulation they tried to hide under concern. And now they're nervous, because you haven't told your side of the story, and you don't need to, because your peace is speaking louder than their performance ever could. They don't understand how you can carry what you know and still walk in dignity, how you can hold what was done to you and still not become bitter. And that mystery, that inner strength, is what leaves them unsettled. Chosen one, this is confirmation. Your silence has become their conviction, not because you're withholding truth, but because you're too aligned to waste words. You know now that revelation is not always meant to be spoken. Sometimes it's meant to reposition you, to teach you, to build you into someone whose authority no longer needs an announcement. You don't have to say anything, they already know. And the fact that you haven't used what you know to destroy them is proof that you're not just chosen, you're trusted by God. Comment below. 777. They know I know, and that's why they stay talking. Part 3. Your presence will haunt them with conviction. They didn't just walk away from you, they walked away from light. And now, even in your absence, something still lingers. Not bitterness, not vengeance, but conviction. Because when you carry truth, you don't have to say much. Your silence speaks louder than their shouting. Your growth testifies without words. Your peace pierces through their performance. They thought walking away from you meant they could escape what they refused to face. But what they didn't realize is, when someone walks away from the sacred, they don't get freedom. They inherit a mirror. That mirror, it doesn't reflect your flaws. It reflects their failure to honor what was holy. You didn't chase, you didn't explain, you didn't post paragraphs or clap back, but they feel you. In conversations they can't finish. In moments when their peace suddenly disappears. In flashbacks when they realize how they laughed at the one sent to lift them. You don't even have to be in the room. And yet, your absence creates a silence that confronts them. That's what happens when you mishandle someone chosen. Your spirit becomes unforgettable, not in a romantic way, in a revelatory way. You were never just a good friend, or a kind soul, or a reliable helper. You were a spiritual turning point, and they missed it. They mistook your love for weakness, your empathy for naivety, your calm for emptiness. But now they know, because now they're surrounded by noise, but lacking in presence. Connected to people, but starving for alignment. And in the quiet spaces of their soul, they remember you and feel the weight of what they mishandled. You were sent to shift atmospheres, not just accompany them. You were the oil in a dry place, the anchor in an unstable season, the whisper of truth in a world addicted to noise. And now that they've stepped out of that covering, life sounds different. Not because you cursed them, but because you were a protection they never recognized. And now that you're gone, they can't deny the shift. Some of them still talk about you, not because they miss you, but because they feel exposed by what you carried. Your name stirs something unresolved in them, a reminder of what they once had access to, a reminder of how they traded gold for gravel, of how they let their ego forfeit what their spirit cried for. And it haunts them, not in fear, but in awareness, conviction. But here's the most powerful part. You didn't have to orchestrate any of this. God did. He let your presence plant seeds. He let your departure fertilize truth. And now, He's using their own memories to water it. Not to destroy them, but to awaken them. Because the ones who rejected you might still be part of the story after they're refined. Until then, walk in peace, walk in assurance. You don't have to revisit what God already released you from. Your job now is to keep becoming, to keep glowing, to keep honoring your assignment. Their regret is not your responsibility, but your rise is still heaven's agenda. Comment below to close this chapter. 777. My presence was never average, it was prophetic. Part 4. You've seen too much to play small. There's a quiet kind of power that comes from surviving what you were never meant to survive. And chosen one, you know exactly what that feels like. You've walked through places others only talk about in whispers. You've carried heartbreak that should have broken your voice, yet here you are, calm, composed, discerning. You've been betrayed by people who smiled at you like family. You've been underestimated in rooms where your spirit was the sharpest thing present. You've been labeled, dismissed, overlooked, but through all of it, you saw. You saw more than they realized. You saw their intentions before they spoke. You saw their fear behind the pride. You saw the pattern in their chaos, the wound beneath their boasting. And when you stopped reacting, they started revealing themselves. That's the part they never expected. You didn't need to clap back. You didn't need to expose anyone. You simply started seeing too clearly to play along. And your silence? That was louder than any confrontation, because when you stopped playing small to protect their egos, the room shifted. Suddenly your presence alone made people rethink their words. Suddenly, people who once called you too sensitive started speaking carefully around you. Not because you demanded it, but because your spirit commands it. And maybe you've noticed this shift. You walk into a space, and without trying, people straighten up. They speak, but there's hesitation. They laugh, but it sounds hollow. It's not fear of you, it's fear of being seen by you. And the truth is, they are. You carry the kind of awareness that makes masks uncomfortable. You hold the kind of anointing that reminds people of what they've buried. You don't have to announce anything. The Holy Spirit announces it for you. That's why they talk. That's why your name stays on tongues even when your voice hasn't spoken. Because you're not just another person in the room. You're a mirror God placed strategically, not to judge, but to reflect what's real. And the more you stay aligned, the more uncomfortable it gets for those still pretending. You've seen too much to pretend. You've seen too much to entertain small talk and shallow motives. You've seen the depths of pain and the height of God's mercy. You've seen betrayal that tore your trust to shreds and restoration that stitched you up with gold thread. You've seen the darkness up close, and still you chose the light. So no, you can't shrink to fit into their comfort zones. You can't play small just to make others feel tall. You weren't anointed for applause. You were prepared in fire for something greater. That's why they feel exposed in your presence. That's why they try to explain themselves to you, even when you never asked. It's not you they're talking to. It's the conviction that follows you. It's the weight of everything you've survived that makes people feel they're standing before something sacred. You don't flaunt it. You don't force it. You just are. And that is enough to stir unease in those who still live double lives. Because chosen ones, when you've suffered in silence, you learn to see in silence. You learn to observe not just what people say, but what they hide. You learn to catch the tone, the twitch, the avoidance, the performance. You see past the social media posts and public personas. You see what they don't say. And instead of using it to tear people down, you carry it with quiet grace. That's what separates you. Others gather information to gossip. You receive revelation to intercede. Others look for dirt to exploit. You carry burdens to the altar. And that's what makes you a threat. Not your words, your restraint. Not your presence, your purpose. Not your status, your stillness. They don't know what you'll say, but they feel what you already know. That's why they're loud. That's why they throw shade. That's why they perform. Because your stillness reveals their chaos. Your peace reveals their desperation. Your clarity reveals their confusion. You don't need to shout. You don't need to expose. You've seen too much to waste your breath. And the truth is, the more they talk, the more they confirm what you already discerned. So don't be surprised when your silence creates noise. Don't be shocked when people start projecting. That's what happens when light stands in the middle of shadow. Everything that's been hidden gets uncomfortable. And you, chosen one, were never meant to blend in. You were meant to illuminate, not for ego, not for validation, but because the God who revealed things to you in private is now revealing you in public. Not to humiliate, but to heal. Stay grounded. Stay still. You don't have to explain yourself to be effective. You don't have to perform to be powerful. Just live. Just walk. Just be. They already know what you carry, even if they don't have the language to name it. And when you comment 777, I know more than I've ever said, you're not boasting, you're confirming. You've seen too much to play small, and now even they can't deny it. Part 5. God taught you when no one was watching. They only see the fruit now, but they weren't there for the planting. They see your wisdom, your calm, your spiritual maturity, and they assume it was always like this. But chosen one, you know better. You know the hours you spent with your face buried in a pillow, asking God why the pain wouldn't stop. You know the nights you stayed up, not because you were anxious, but because the Holy Spirit wouldn't let you sleep until you prayed through what you didn't even understand. While the world was busy chasing platforms, you were chasing God in secret. And it was there, in that hidden place, that He taught you the things no preacher, no course, no book could ever fully explain. He taught you through loss, through the betrayal that shattered your sense of safety, through the failures that left you ashamed to look in the mirror, through the silent seasons where no one called, no one saw, no one cared. That's where you learned. That's where God pulled you into divine intimacy and started teaching you not just information, but revelation. Not just facts, but discernment. Not just words, but weight. Chosen one, you didn't get your understanding from opinions. You got it from obedience. When people mocked you for walking away from situations that looked fine, they didn't know it was God who whispered, "Leave now." When people laughed because you declined opportunities that seemed golden, they didn't see the vision He showed you, that not all gold is from heaven. You started learning the sound of God's voice not through thunder, but through quiet conviction, through the way your stomach turned when something was off, through the way your spirit trembled when you were about to disobey. And now you carry a type of discernment that isn't loud, but it's unshakable. You weren't trained by the world. You were taught by Jehovah Nissi, the Lord your banner. He trained you in secret so you could stand in places others collapse. He let you walk through storms alone so you'd learn to hear His voice above the wind. He let people lie about you so you could learn how to respond like Christ. Not for revenge, but for redemption. He allowed you to be overlooked so He could teach you how to be anchored in His validation alone. That's why you move the way you do now. You're not reactive, because you've been trained to listen before you speak. You're not easily manipulated, because God taught you how to detect the root behind the fruit. You're not in a rush, because you've learned that God's timing isn't late, it's surgical. You carry an authority that makes people wonder, who taught you this? And the answer is simple. The one who formed you. The one who never left you, even when everyone else did. There's a power in being trained in the dark. It builds something in your character that can't be faked. You don't need the spotlight to function because you've already been functioning in the shadows. And while others crumble when no one claps, you thrive because your validation never came from the crowd. It came from the Father who watched you pray when no one knew you were broken. It came from the Spirit who comforted you when your friends turned to gossip. And, chosen one, let's be honest, some of the most important lessons didn't come in a church building. They came in your car when you pulled over because the weight was too much. They came in your room when worship broke out with no music. They came in the middle of a breakdown when all you could do was whisper, "God help me." And He did, again and again. He showed up, not always to fix it immediately, but to teach you how to carry His presence in it. Now, when you walk into a room, there's a weight to you, a spiritual depth, a peace that can't be explained, because it wasn't learned from man. It was imparted from above. That's why people ask you questions they don't ask anyone else. That's why strangers open up to you after 5 minutes. That's why you can walk into a chaotic environment and shift the atmosphere without saying a word. Because you've been taught by the teacher, and what He placed in you is unshakable. God taught you the language of silence, the discipline of waiting, the strength of stillness. And while others need noise to feel alive, you've learned that true power is quiet. It's clean. It doesn't compete. It doesn't chase. It just stands, knowing it was prepared in fire. So no, you didn't get this oil for free. You didn't wake up with this wisdom. It was forged in tears. It was poured out through obedience. And the ones who assume you're just intuitive or just lucky don't know how many times you wanted to quit. They don't know how many times you had to choose grace over rage. They don't know how many hours you spent repenting, not for a public fall, but for a private misalignment. And that's why you don't brag. That's why you don't perform. Because when God teaches you, He also humbles you. You know it's Him, not you. You know it's His mercy, not your merit. And you walk accordingly, quietly, boldly, holy. This is why the enemy fears you. Because your authority doesn't come from popularity, it comes from proximity. You've been close to God in pain, in silence, in surrender. And that's what makes you dangerous to darkness. Because even when you don't speak, the oil speaks. Even when you don't shout, the anointing breaks chains. You're not loud, you're lethal. Because the Spirit trained you while no one was watching. And now they can't unsee what you carry. Part 6. Your presence feels like conviction. It's not what you say, it's what you carry. And chosen one, you're starting to notice it, aren't you? The shift in energy when you enter a room, the sudden change in conversation, the awkward glances, the overly loud laughter meant to cover tension. You didn't walk in with judgment. You didn't say a word about anyone's choices, but your presence said everything your mouth never needed to. Because what you carry isn't just light, it's clarity. And clarity makes people nervous when they've been hiding behind confusion. You didn't try to make them uncomfortable, you were just being obedient. But when someone's entire identity is built around illusion, the presence of truth, even in silence, can feel like a threat. And that's what you've become to some people. A mirror they didn't ask for. A quiet reminder of a God they've tried to forget. A walking example that you can choose differently, you can live purely, and you can surrender instead of manipulate. And make no mistake, it's not arrogance they feel, it's conviction. It's not superiority, it's separation. You were set apart, marked. And now, the way you carry yourself exposes the weightlessness of how others are living. You don't have to point fingers. The Spirit in you shines so brightly that shadows start to panic. They start to squirm. They start to over-explain, defend, project, or attack, not because of something you did, but because of something you didn't do. You didn't join the gossip, and it made them question their own words. You didn't laugh at the cruelty, and suddenly it wasn't funny anymore. You didn't retaliate when insulted, and your silence made their insult echo back at them. That's what happens when someone anointed walks into a room full of masks. You don't tear the masks off. The light does. And they don't know how to handle that. They'd prefer if you played along, if you pretended not to see, if you diluted your discernment to make them feel more comfortable. But you can't. Not because you're trying to be better, but because you've been called to be different. And when you've spent time in the presence of God, your very body becomes a temple, a vessel, a carrier of His atmosphere. You don't just bring light, you carry weight, spiritual weight. That's why some people avoid you, then secretly watch you. That's why they mock your peace in public, then crave it in private. Because your presence convicts, not through condemnation, but through contrast. You walk in wholeness in a world used to broken coping. You walk in honesty where deception is normal. You walk in compassion where pride has taken over. And it's jarring, it's disruptive. But chosen one, you weren't sent to be palatable, you were sent to be holy. And holiness shakes things up. Holiness is offensive to rebellion. Holiness breaks cycles without needing applause. And that's what you carry. Not just good vibes, not just positive energy. You carry consecration, purity, integrity. And these aren't trends. They're threats to everything that's built on lies. That's why they flinch. That's why they overcompensate. That's why they act like you're too much. Even when you've barely spoken, it's not personal, it's spiritual. When the presence of God shows up, every counterfeit spirit starts to tremble. That's why Jesus didn't always have to preach. Sometimes just being there disrupted systems, unsettled the proud. and awakened the desperate. And if His Spirit lives in you, why would your presence be any different? Some people used to think they were fine until you showed up and reminded them of what they've ignored. Some thought they had all the answers until you walked in carrying real peace. Some thought they were in control until your posture of surrender revealed the cracks in their strategy. You're not trying to expose anyone, but when you're lit by the fire of heaven, it's impossible not to reveal what's hiding in the dark. And maybe that's why you felt isolated. Maybe that's why you felt tension around people you used to be close to. It's not hate. It's not always jealousy. Sometimes it's just that their conscience can't stay silent around someone who carries truth. You remind them of choices they've buried. You remind them of promises they've abandoned. And instead of running to God, some run away from you. But don't let that break your heart. Let it confirm your calling. Because, chosen one, this is proof that you've been set apart, that your presence is not entertainment, it's encounter, that even when you say nothing, heaven speaks through you. So keep walking, keep shining, keep loving, without shrinking. You don't need to explain your peace. You don't need to tone down your joy. You don't need to apologize for the fire in your eyes. The Spirit of God rests upon you. And every room you enter, whether they say it or not, feels it. Let them talk. Let them whisper. But understand this. If your silence convicts them, then maybe it's not silence at all. Maybe it's the voice of God echoing through your stillness. And that, chosen one, is more powerful than 1,000 sermons. Part 7. They watch you closely, hoping you slip. They won't admit it, but they're watching you. Every move, every word, every facial expression. Not because they admire you, but because they're waiting for a crack in your armor, waiting for a slip-up, waiting for anything they can point to and say, see. They're not that special. They study your life with more intensity than they study their own. And chosen one, it's not because you've done anything to deserve it. It's because the light in you unsettles the shadows in them. They want so badly to prove that you're just like them, that your peace is fake, your strength is an act, your discernment just a lucky guess. Because if they can convince themselves that you're not truly different, then they won't have to face the reality that you were set apart, that God did in fact anoint you, that your silence does carry weight, that your walk does reflect the fingerprints of heaven. So they watch, not with love, not with support, but with quiet suspicion, hoping to find evidence that will justify their disbelief. You may not even realize how closely they monitor you, but trust me, they see your posts, even if they never like them. They listen to your words, even if they pretend to ignore you. They keep tabs on your path, even as they act indifferent. It's not always envy, sometimes it's fear. Fear that everything you've said is actually true. Fear that your faith might reveal the emptiness of their pretense. Fear that your obedience will remind them of the calling they've ignored. But here's the mystery. You're not trying to expose them. You never were. You're just living, healing, growing, staying aligned. You're not watching them, but they're watching you like their reputation depends on it. Why? Because deep down they know your light is not artificial. Your integrity is not performance. Your grace is not weakness. And the more they watch, the more convicted they feel, not by your actions, but by your consistency. They've seen people rise through manipulation, but you rose through surrender. They've seen people gain power through lies, but you You walk in power that can't be traced to anything earthly, and that bothers them, because it means there's something more, something supernatural, backing you up. And that terrifies anyone who built their life on control. So they wait for you to get angry and explode, for you to fail publicly, for you to react to the insults. But Chosen One, you don't. You don't give them what they expect. You don't respond from the flesh. You don't retaliate. You stay grounded. You forgive when it doesn't make sense. You bless those who curse you. You keep showing up, not with ego, but with authority. And that, more than anything, disarms them. They wanted drama. You gave them dignity. They wanted chaos. You brought calm. They wanted to watch you spiral. But you walked in wisdom. You chose to let God fight your battles. And while they waited for your collapse, heaven was writing your comeback. That's the part that breaks them. The more they try to distract you, the more focused you become. The more they throw darts, the more anointed you get. They don't understand how you're not shaken, how you're still moving, still glowing, still blessing, still rising, because everything they're doing should have broken someone by now. But you're still standing, and you're doing it with grace. And now, it's not just your strength they fear, it's your restraint. They know you could expose them, you could clap back, you could call out the hypocrisy, but you don't. And that terrifies them, because your silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's spiritual maturity. It's the mark of someone who doesn't need to prove anything, because God already proved it through how He preserved you. So let them watch. Let them speculate. Let them wait. You were never called to entertain their expectations. You were called to obey heaven. You're not in a show. You're in a season. And your only audience is the one who sees in secret and rewards in the open. Chosen One, your life is being read like a scroll, not just by people, but by spirits. And every time you choose obedience over reaction, peace over pride, purpose over pettiness, you are preaching without words. You are warring without violence. You are exposing without lifting a finger. Don't be discouraged by their eyes. Don't shrink under their scrutiny. They watched Jesus too, not to learn, but to trap, not to worship, but to accuse. And still, He fulfilled every word spoken over Him. So will you. The more they watch, the more they'll witness what God is doing. And eventually, they'll have to admit, they didn't see your slip. They saw your strength, and they won't be able to unsee it. Part 8. You're not just watching. You're protecting secrets. There's a reason you don't say much, a reason you just sit there, quiet, still, eyes that seem to see right through the moment. People think you're passive, but in truth, you're protecting something. Because Chosen One, you don't just observe, you guard. You carry insight that wasn't meant to be used as ammunition. You've been given revelation that wasn't meant to be broadcasted. There are things God has shown you about people, about systems, about spiritual realms that no one knows you know. And that is by divine design. You're not silent because you don't know. You're silent because you do. And you understand something the world forgets. Not everything you see is meant to be said. Not everything God reveals is for confrontation. Some things are given for intercession. That's the weight of your calling. You don't just hear gossip. You discern spirits. You don't just witness situations. You detect patterns. And with that awareness comes responsibility. God gave you access to hidden things because He knew you wouldn't misuse them. He knew you wouldn't run to social media or to the group chat or to your ego. He knew you'd carry it with reverence Because the kind of secrets heaven shares aren't for clout, they're for covenant, and your restraint, your maturity, your quiet strength is proof that you were chosen not just to know, but to steward. That's what people don't understand about you. They think you're just being polite, or maybe shy. But what you're doing is deeper. You're shielding sacred space. You're covering people with the same mercy you received. You're protecting reputations, even when they tried to damage yours. You're carrying the burden of knowing, without ever letting it leak out of your lips. That's not fear. That's favor. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And if only they knew the truth. If only they realized that you could have exposed them, could have spoken up, drawn attention to every lie, every manipulation, every mask. But you didn't. Not because you didn't feel it, not because you didn't see it, but because you listened to the Spirit say, "Don't speak on that. Just pray." You could have gotten revenge. Instead, you chose restraint. You could have ruined their name. Instead, you chose silence. And while others would have used the knowledge you carried to destroy, you built an altar instead. That's why you move differently. That's why you're not easily impressed or easily deceived, because you've sat in the classroom of the Holy Spirit, where truth is sharp and timing is sacred. You've learned that speaking prematurely can sabotage purpose. You've learned that knowing something doesn't give you the right to announce it. You've learned that the most powerful thing a chosen one can do is pray in secret what others scream in public. There are moments when you feel the weight of what you carry, and it's heavy, because no one knows how much you hold inside. No one sees the tears you've cried for people who hurt you. No one sees the times you've wanted to say, "I know exactly what you're doing," but instead you whispered, "Lord, cover them anyway." Chosen one, that's spiritual authority. Not reacting when provoked. Not revealing what was shown in private. Not exploiting what you know, but covering it in prayer. Because you've realized something holy, that power without love becomes poison, and that's not who you are. God can trust you with secrets because He knows you won't twist them for power. He knows you won't weaponize the truth. He knows you'll carry it like oil, not like gasoline. And that's rare. That's sacred. That's what makes you dangerous, not to people but to darkness. Because every secret you protect becomes a stronghold you tear down in prayer. Every revelation you don't reveal becomes a sword sharpened in silence. You're not just a watcher, you're a keeper, a protector, a spiritual vault, and the enemy hates that about you because he can't figure out what you know. He's confused by your peace, threatened by your silence. He knows something's happening in the spirit, but he can't access it because heaven hid it in you. And maybe that's why some people are unsettled around you. It's not that you said anything, it's that they feel exposed, they feel red, they feel like you're holding something. And you are. You're holding the line. You're holding revelation. You're holding back judgment and releasing mercy instead. You're holding the very thing that they need, even if they don't understand it yet. So keep watching, keep guarding, keep protecting what God gave you. Don't let the pressure to prove anything cause you to speak prematurely. What you know is holy. And one day, if God calls you to speak, it'll be with fire and clarity and purpose, not pettiness. But until then, continue to be the one who sees much, says little, and carries weight. Because, chosen one, your silence is not absence, it's armor. And while they try to figure you out, while they wonder why you're so composed, so calm, so collected. Just smile, because they'll never understand how much you've seen and still chosen to protect. Part 9. Heaven trusts you with what others can't handle. Chosen one, there's a reason God showed you what He didn't show them. There's a reason why you've seen glimpses of the future while others are still stumbling through their present. A reason why you feel the spiritual tension before the room gets tense. Why you discern motives before anyone speaks. Why you're weeping in prayer while everyone else is still laughing. You didn't ask to carry this. You didn't go searching for this level of spiritual weight, but heaven looked at you and trusted you with what would crush someone else. Because God saw your heart. He saw your response in the silent seasons. He saw you surrender when no one was watching. He saw you choose mercy when vengeance would have been justified. And that's why He gave you eyes to see beyond the surface, ears to hear what others miss, and a spirit that stays grounded even when the storm is invisible to everyone else. You are not just chosen to walk, you are chosen to carry vision, to carry warning, to carry burdens that aren't yours, but somehow you still feel them. That's the cost of spiritual access. That's the hidden assignment behind the insight. While others ask, why me? You live in the reality of, it had to be me. Not for pride, not for power, but for preservation. Because God needs someone on earth He can trust with secrets, strategies, and spiritual timing. And you said yes. Heaven trusts you with what others can't handle. That's why your dreams are heavier. That's why your warfare is quieter but deeper. That's why you feel everything long before it happens. Because you're a spiritual forerunner. You carry the blueprint before the building appears. You pray for people before they even know they're in danger. You see patterns before they manifest. You fast not just for yourself, but for generations you'll never meet. And while it may feel like a burden, heaven calls it trust. God doesn't give this to just anyone. There are people with influence who don't have what you have. There are leaders with platforms who don't carry what you carry, because this kind of trust doesn't come through exposure. It comes through refinement, through obedience, through long nights of saying, God, I don't understand, but I'll still say yes. You are the one who holds the keys. Not physical keys, but spiritual ones. Keys to unlock healing in others through your testimony. Keys to break cycles through your intercession. Keys to bring clarity in the fog of confusion. And yes, sometimes you wonder, why can't I unsee what I've seen? Why do I carry this grief, this weight, this urgency? But the truth is, you were born with a deep well inside of you. And heaven keeps drawing from it, because the water is pure. You're the one who doesn't just pray, you travail. You don't just notice, you feel. You don't just walk into rooms, you shift them. And God gave you that mantle because He knew you wouldn't abuse it. He knew you wouldn't build a brand from it. He knew you'd kneel before you spoke and cry before you judged. Others can't understand why you're so quiet, so sensitive, so alert. They don't know what it's like to wake up with someone else's name on your heart, to sense danger miles away, to carry unspoken burdens for people who would never thank you. But heaven sees it, and heaven honors it. You are a keeper of the deep. You don't live on the surface. You live in the realm of revelation. You carry the weight of what hasn't even happened yet, and God allows it because you don't panic. You prepare. You don't gossip. You guard. You don't flex what you know. You fast. He gave you prophetic instincts not to be flashy, but to be ready. He gave you discernment not to call people out, but to call them up. He gave you foresight not so you could feel important, but so you could act in alignment with eternal importance. That's why you feel the weight of things before they make sense. That's why you walk away from what looks harmless to others. That's why you obey even when it costs you relationships. Because you're not moved by the visible. You're anchored in the spiritual. So yes, this is lonely. This is heavy. And yes, sometimes it hurts. But chosen one, you are heaven's vault. You are the secret keeper, the silent warrior, the one God trusted to be the gate in a time of war. You're the intercessor who wakes up when others sleep. You're the watchman who cries in tongues instead of arguments. You are the one who knows and still chooses love. Keep carrying what they can't. Keep stewarding what they dismiss. Because you're not just protecting a moment. You're guarding destiny. And heaven is backing you every step of the way. Part 10. You were never meant to be understood, only obeyed. There's a kind of ache that comes with being chosen. The ache of being misunderstood by almost everyone, yet still being responsible to love them. You've tried to explain yourself before, haven't you? Tried to tell people why you chose silence instead of retaliation, why you walked away instead of fighting for your name, why you took the narrow road instead of the stage, and all you got in return was confused stares, twisted stories, and maybe even betrayal. But chosen one, here's the truth. You were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be obeyed, not obeyed by people, obeyed by heaven. God didn't call you to be liked. He called you to be loyal. He didn't anoint you to be accepted. He anointed you to stand. And in doing so, he knew the path would be lonely. He knew the very ones you intercede for would doubt you. The very ones you protect in prayer would mock your silence. The very ones you've carried in your spirit would look you in the eye and mislabel your heart. But even in that pain, there's purpose. You see, obedience doesn't require an audience. It doesn't need applause or agreement. It needs only one thing: a yes. A yes when it's quiet. A yes when it's confusing. A yes when you feel forgotten, forsaken, invisible. Because God's assignments rarely come with full explanations. He just whispers, move, leave, wait, speak. And even when you don't understand the why, your spirit knows the who, and that's enough. You were not called to blend in. You were not called to conform. You were set apart, sanctified, to disturb every system of darkness just by walking in light. So no, you won't always be understood. Your boundaries will be called cold. Your discernment will be called judgment. Your elevation will be called pride. But keep walking, because you weren't placed here to be decoded. You were placed here to deliver. Jesus himself wasn't understood, not by his family, not by his hometown, not even by his closest disciples at times, but he still obeyed. He still healed. He still prayed. He still died, without ever getting the full affirmation from those around him. And if the Son of God was misunderstood in his calling, why should we expect anything different in ours? They're not supposed to get you. They're not supposed to understand why you turned down that opportunity, why you chose to forgive that betrayal, why you keep showing up when it costs you so much. They don't see the covenant. They don't feel the fire that burns when you try to disobey. They don't carry the burden you carry. And they never will, because it wasn't given to them. It was given to you. So stop explaining, stop defending, stop diluting the oil just to be more palatable. The anointing wasn't poured on you for the approval of the crowd. It was poured on you to break yokes, to destroy cycles, to silence the accuser, to raise the standard in rooms that had none. And you'll know you've matured when you stop needing people to understand you and start focusing only on whether heaven is pleased. When their confusion doesn't shake your clarity, when their silence doesn't hinder your obedience, when their mockery doesn't mute your mission. Chosen one, your life is not meant to make sense to people. It's meant to make impact for the kingdom. You are a walking contradiction to the world's logic, a mystery to the carnal, a threat to the fake. That's why you're rarely praised for the very things God celebrates you for in secret. But take heart, what's misunderstood now will one day be revealed in glory. One day the ones who mocked your faith will marvel at your fruit. The ones who doubted your journey will witness your deliverance. The ones who twisted your motives will see your mantle. Because God wastes nothing, and everything you obeyed in private, every quiet yes, every painful surrender, every secret battle, He will honor openly. So if you've been walking with a torn heart, one part longing to be seen, the other committed to being faithful, let this be your reminder. You were never meant to be understood, only obeyed. And heaven knows. Heaven keeps record. Heaven smiles when you choose purpose over popularity. Let them misunderstand you. Let them misquote you. Let them think what they want, because your obedience is not to them. It's to the one who called you. And when it's all said and done, it won't be their applause or rejection that matters. It will be His voice saying, "Well done, my faithful servant." Emotional closing plus call to prayer. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. You never did. The weight you've carried, the discernment you've stewarded, the restraint you've chosen again and again, they speak for you louder than words ever could. Chosen one, you've lived through storms that no one clapped for. You've obeyed when no one understood. And now, even your silence is making noise in the spirit. They don't know how much you know. They don't know the secrets you've buried in prayer, the spiritual battles you've fought alone, the tears you've cried for people who only saw your strength. But heaven knows, and heaven is responding. There's a reason they can't stop talking. It's not because you spoke too much, it's because you spoke just enough. It's because your life, your presence, your walk with God is convicting in a way that noise never could be. Your silence has stirred spirits. Your peace has made chaos tremble. Your discernment has revealed what others tried to hide. And still, you stayed low. Still, you chose peace. Some people are afraid of you, not because you're loud, but because you're clear. Because you don't play the games. Because you walk with something that wasn't bought, taught, or borrowed. You walk with God. And that changes everything. You weren't raised for the spotlight. You were hidden in the shadows so that your spirit would grow roots, not just reach. You were trained in fire so that when the winds blew, you wouldn't fall like the others. And now that you've come out on the other side, they're realizing what you've carried all along. You've known more than you said. You've seen more than you shared. You've prayed more than you posted. And that's what makes you different. So chosen one, walk forward. Not in bitterness, not in defense, but in stillness. God is not asking you to explain yourself. He's asking you to continue, to keep obeying, keep trusting, keep staying hidden in Him, because the same God who gave you vision in silence will also bring vindication in His time. Let them keep talking. Let them wonder, let them guess, because one day they'll understand it wasn't you they were uncomfortable with. It was the God you carry. And you never needed to be loud to be powerful. You just needed to be faithful. And now, I want to speak to your spirit, the part of you that's been holding back tears while listening, the part that's tired of carrying what no one sees. I want to invite you to pray. Wherever you are right now, whisper this in your spirit or say it out loud. God, thank you for trusting me with this calling, even when it's heavy. Thank you for teaching me in silence, for molding me in secret, and for walking with me when no one else did. I surrender my need to be understood. I release the pressure to be perfect. Help me carry what you've given me with wisdom, humility, and peace. Use my life, even in silence, as a vessel of your glory. I choose obedience. I choose love. I choose to trust that you see what no one else does. In Jesus' name, amen. If that prayer touched something deep inside of you, I invite you to comment. 777. I know more than I've ever said, and I still choose peace. And if this message confirmed what you've been carrying in the quiet, consider dropping a super thank. Not because you have to, but because when you sow into sacred ground, you align with what heaven is already doing in you. Every seed goes toward expanding this space where chosen ones like you can be seen, heard, and strengthened. This is Chosen Echo. You're not here by accident. You're here because your journey matters, and your silence has been seen by heaven. And one day, it will speak louder than any voice ever could. Keep walking, keep shining, keep choosing peace. They know you know more than you're saying, and that's why they can't stop watching.